And welcome back. So in the last video, if you remember, we removed the engine out of our gray 2009 TRX 1500 and got it off to the happy to report it was dropped off at the machine shop the other day. They are currently going over it, reviewing things and seeing what it's going to take from their perspective to machine it and to get the block back in spec. So what we've asked them to do is look at the heads, look at the block. They're going to give us what is called a short block back, meaning we're going to get the block back with the crank installed, connecting rods and pistons, and then they're going to stop, and then we're going to come back and finish putting the heads back on the block and just do the normal assembly like we talked about earlier. So while we'll wait for a phone call back on that one, we've also ordered the crank, the new cam, the set of Hellcat lifters, and hardened push rods. Yes, we're going to put hardened push rods in this engine. A little bit of overkill for what the usage would be, but we're in there. We want to try to make this engine as bulletproof as possible, since it is going through a machine shop and pretty much will hopefully come out looking and acting like a brand new engine with 0 miles on it. I mean, not 0 miles actually, but you know what I mean. It's been reset. It's been once it gets machined and puts back in and gets put back together, in my mind, that kind of resets your mileage on that particular engine to 0, or at least 0 since the rebuild. So like I said, the cam we're going to put in it is a little bit more of an upgraded cam rather than stock, and I've got with my tuner on that one. As we discussed earlier, it's not so aggressive that it would require a custom tune. It'll work with the stock 2009 software that's in the PCM. We will be going with the Hellcat lifters. I did verify with my tuner that just putting the MDS block off plugs in that engine will be perfectly fine. It's not going to mess with anything, as long as we put our tuner in, which we will do. I've got a Diablo Sport tuner. We'll just put our tuner in and we'll turn the MDS system off. That way it'll keep it from trying to throw error codes by it not seeing those solenoids installed. So again, cam, Hellcat lifters, aka non-MDS lifters, MDS block off plugs, hardened push rods, and the block is and heads are getting evaluated / machined what they need in order to get everything back into spec, and that should hopefully once and for all fix our compression problem we were having with that #1 cylinder. Now with that being said, there's always the chance they're going to come back and say that they found something catastrophically wrong with the block, it's not fixable, and if that's the case, we'll pull the engine out of the red 2012 that's behind the garage. But we'll see what that comes to. Let's see, but what you see here in front of you is that I'm going to do a little bit of Loom Repair today on our 2009, and there are several spots in this, just due to the age and heat cycles of the loom, that this loom, as you touch it, just kind of falls apart, and you can see a lot of it just kind of flaking off right there. So went out to Amazon, got a couple bags of loom. This is all 1/2 inch, and this is a bag of looks to be 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch loom, and also the fabric type wiring harness tape, and I'll have links in the description of exactly what I'm using down here. So this first piece that you see is for the front differential when you engage 4-wheel drive. So this is just a little jumper or pigtail that goes from the actuator motor that locks in the front drive axles into the front diff, over to what then plugs into the main wiring harness for the engine. And this looks to be probably about 1/4 inch stuff. So what I'm going to do is just go through here, remove the rest of this old loom tape, and just get a new piece of loom on here, and a couple of wraps and a couple of spots of some fabric tape and at least address this issue, because I don't want to leave stuff like this sitting in the engine compartment, because you can see there's absolutely no loom left on that, and the only thing really left holding this section of this wiring harness together is just the tape. You know, with the exception of this area right here, you've got exposed wiring. So most of the loom, to show you in the engine compartment, actually still looks fairly decent. You can see that there isn't really even color faded. So these areas right here we'll kind of leave alone. We're going to go through and address areas like this where you can see that this section that goes from here to here has seen better days. It's starting to deteriorate, so you want to just go ahead and get a new piece on that one, get it wrapped up, and it's going to be the same process for the rest of this wiring harness. In any spot where we find that we have a piece that might be deteriorating or could benefit from just having a new piece applied to it, then we'll just go ahead and put a new piece of loom wrap on it. Yeah, like I said, not too riveting of a video today, more of a maintenance item. And there's one area back there on that main harness that you see with some of the tape's coming off, and we'll put some new loom tape on that again as a preventative measure. One thing I think that we're going to also look into, and it may be a part of this video or we may do it in a future video, I'm not sure yet, is those oxygen sensors. If you remember before, when we had the heads off and we had easy access to it, we spoke about replacing them. Not that they're necessarily bad, but because we have the newer ones, it's one of those things where, you know, now more than ever, you've got the engine out, you're never going to have easier access to these components. So what I may do is get out the old oxygen sensor kit, sockets that is, and get those oxygen sensors out and go ahead and replace them with the replacements while we're here. Again, admittedly, they're not potentially showing bad, and we haven't really had the engine running long enough to evaluate them long term, but again, it's one of those things. The engine's out of our way, we got nice easy access to it, we have the parts here, we might as well change it out. The other items that I spoke of that we can do, as I talked about before, you know, we can come through and cover up our positive for our starter and our positive for our alternator to make sure that we don't get any shorts. And then we can reattach the ground that we took off on that side of the vehicle, hook up a temporary 12-volt source and replace the blend door actuator inside the cab. If you remember, we had the one that was clicking. Again, I may do that in this video, or it may be a future video. I may do a series of just kind of smaller videos, just kind of working on these little smaller repairs that we can do, you know, again, because they're not engine related. So we can do items like that. We can trace down, again, like I said before, the electrical issue that we have with the turn signal here, and the rear driver's side light is, according to the scan tool, also having a bit of an issue. We've also got in, and I'll show you those here at the tail end of this video in case you're curious. We went ahead and ordered in, you know, all the new gaskets and seal kits and so on and so forth to be able to reassemble our long block once our short block comes back from the machine shop. So we've got those items ready to go. And I've already commented that we've already ordered the cam and the lifters. So as far as getting the engine reassembled, it's just a matter of a waiting game, waiting for all the parts and of course the short block and stuff to come back from the machine shop, and or to find out from the machine shop, you know, if the block is viable. But with enough of that rambling going on, I'm just gonna, like I said, get down to work and replace some of these damaged sections of loom, and then I'll bring it back. Thank you much. So just to show you, that's that jumper wire that you saw earlier. Again, goes to the front diff and locks in the axles to the front axles to the front diff. You see just a nice little fresh piece of loom with some new loom tape on the ends. Just a couple of minutes, helps protect the wires, makes everything look a heck of a lot better. We got an area that we've already peeled back right here, and this is the area that's up by the battery, so it kind of makes sense that this loom would deteriorate with being in the presence of you know, battery fumes from the battery's charging, so on and so forth. A little bit of acid here and there. So we've got this area stripped back. What I'm going to do is take some of that fabric tape and tape up this area up to this point, replace this bad section of tape, do a little bit of overlap, and then do a whole new piece of loom from here where the bottom of this battery connector is at for negative, all the way up to here. Now you got to be mindful of this, so that'll just come out of the opening of the loom, and then we'll cross over some loom tape to re-secure this. In case you're curious, that's the connector that goes to the brake fluid monitor. Okay, so we'll work on this piece and I'll bring it back. So you can see we've taken our fabric tape, we've come down here where we removed the old tape that was kind of crinkly and falling apart, and just rewrapped it up to this Y where it was originally. Now we're just going to put on our replacement loom and go from there. See you in a minute. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our, went ahead and did a couple crisscrosses in here, and our joint where this piece of loom went in, kind of like this main harness. Again, just looking to seal up creases and crevices where dirt and water and stuff could potentially get in there. So we got our joint in, we've got our new piece of flex you can see here, and I actually went ahead and used a loom tape and kind of taped almost the full length that you can see here, because this is up by the battery area, and since it did kind of erode over time just due to the presence of being close to the battery, you know, this fabric tape isn't all that expensive. So again, just looking to give it some extra support. You can see our joint that comes out the side there, it goes to our brake fluid monitor. The tape on the end of this one was also deteriorating and kind of falling apart. That's what's left of it. Again, so we just retaped the end because, you know, we're here. Not that it was affecting anything, but, you know, we're here, it was falling apart, might as well go ahead and seal it back up. And there's one area back there right above the transmission, you can kind of see it white in color where the tape is starting to fall apart and come off the loom. I'm going to get that area taped up. But yeah, for the most part, as you can see, we don't really have too much loom to replace, at least at this point in time. When we get back in here and start troubleshooting these lights and doing things like pulling that screw out of there and replacing it with the proper piece of mounting hardware, we may have some additional loom damage to repair, but it's not too bad. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see anything on the back of that firewall over there that's looking bad at the moment. Everything going to the PCM looks in decent condition, nothing's falling apart. Yeah, like I said, surprisingly enough, a lot of this wiring harness is in good shape. And these didn't have pieces of loom on it, it just had the fabric loom tape on it. See, this goes to the throttle body, that one goes to the inlet air temperature sensor on the intake. And again, that's why we came through here and labeled these, because we're not quite sure how long it's going to take to get the parts and be able to put the long block back together. So, you know, we're not, that way we're not guessing on where our connections go. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to get back and wrap some loom tape around that rear section there. Can I get that beef back up? And I'll bring it back. Thank you much. Okay, welcome back. You can see that area right there on that loom, right above kind of the 2 o'clock position of the transmission. You can see that's now been rewrapped. And this is what was left of the part label / tape that was on that section. Found another section that was again up by the battery. You can see this is their positive cable where it hits this junction here. All this entire section from here to here was taped, and the factory tape was literally falling off as you can touch it. That's been retaped, as well as I found an exposed section right here in this joint where you could actually see the wiring inside the loom. So we put a couple of wraps of tape again as we were retaping this. And if you look right here, this is the kind of stuff I'm looking for. You can see where the tape has been rubbing against something and falling apart, and you can see the wiring underneath. So there's not a section of loom here, it was just tape, but the tape itself is shot. So I don't see any nicks or cuts in the wiring. So what I'm going to do is, I think I've got, yeah, I think the 1/2 inch piece of loom will fit this. I'm just going to put a little piece of loom on this and then wrap from here to here with that fabric tape. So this is the kind of stuff I'm just looking to make sure it doesn't become a problem later on. I think that's actually going to be the last section. Everything else actually is still looking pretty good on this harness. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of putting a piece in that and get some tape on it, and I'll bring it back. Thank you much. Okay, so you can see that we've got our piece of loom that we put in here, and then we just crisscrossed this joint here and then wrapped from here back to here, just to again help secure this area, since we knew that we were getting some exposed wiring. And again, it's kind of right where the battery's at. And if you look where this battery loom attaches, which was right there, had a little hole there, you can see that this piece here where we had that hole at, it looks like it was probably rubbing up against the edge of this battery tray. So yeah, but it doesn't matter. We've got a nice piece of loom in there now. Got plenty of tape now wrapping up that exposed area. So again, just looking to try to help prevent problems, you know, obviously before they become problems. But like I said, I think that's going to be it on this piece of it. The rest of this loom looks in fairly still decent shape. Obviously we've got our loom and we got our fabric tape, so as we're putting the engine back in here or doing other work on the vehicle, if we need to, we'll replace a piece of loom or replace some tape as needed. But I'm gonna wrap it up on this one, make a little bit different of a video, not nearly as long as they normally are, and probably lacking a little bit of content. It's not a very exciting subject, I get it, by just going through and re-looming and relapping and re-taping said loom, but it's definitely something that you want to do. So again, you just don't want to chafe a wire or have a wire cut into a frame somewhere, because that's how you get shorts the grounds and other rather annoying items to troubleshoot. But like I said, there'll be links in the description of Amazon of where I got the loom and the fabric tape that I'm using, and so on and so forth. And to wrap this up, you'll see that actuator down there for the front diff. That plugs into that pigtail we were working on earlier. So that pigtail plugs into there, comes out across that front diff, lays down over here where the engine block is, and on this side of the engine block up against the frame where you see that little kind of mounting hole sticking out, part of this wiring harness plugs into there, and that's actually that goes to our battery box. Let's see if I can find it here. It is on this section of harness that it has its mate. There it is right there. That's the guy there. This will be up against the frame. There's our mounting point. That plugs into that hole you saw there, and the other half of that pigtail for that four-wheel drive lock plugs into that plug, which is convenient. Glad they made it a pigtail out of it, because it makes it a heck of a lot easier to deal with this wiring harness. With that being said, I'll bring you back for the next one, depending on how the weather holds up. The remainder of today or tomorrow, we may tackle just replacing the oxygen sensors that we were talking about earlier, or we may bring you back and tackle replacing the blend door actuator inside the cab that clicks and is stripping gears every time you power the vehicle up. Either way, we'll bring you back for something. Other than that, I'll talk to you later. Bye.